Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 250 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman. What a milestone, 250. I'm so excited you're here today. And I wanted to dedicate this episode to help you plan 2026 like a business owner. Now, if you're listening to this in the future, this really applies to the next 12 months or even to the next quarter. So take this as not only a process for 2026, but for an ongoing process that you can leverage, whether it's for the whole next 12 months or for the next quarter, so that you can set yourself up for success and achieve goals that you might not have even imagined were possible for yourself. So that's what we're here to do here today. This is the time of year where of course, we're all planning, right? Some of us love planning. So it's a treat to get to plan for the next year. But as we go into this planning season, I have a warning for you. And that's what I really want to share with you here today is that warning so that you don't make the common mistakes that I often see independent consultants making and therefore either sabotage your goals from the outset or underperform much less than what you're capable of achieving. So, want to help you by way of giving you a warning so that you don't fall into the common trap and also so that you can make the most of this planning time. Again, whether you're doing that now over the holidays or, in the weeks to come, really want to help you make this not only effective for the coming year, but also to create a more effective, ongoing planning process for yourself in your business. Okay, so with that, let's talk about today's agenda. First, we're going to start off and I'll share with you what that trap is by starting off and going through the 4 most common planning mistakes that I see independent consultants making and boutique consultancy owners making. Then we'll talk about the impact of planning in that way, those common mistakes. And ultimately, the root cause. It's so important to understand the root cause of making these mistakes. And that's the trap. This will be the trap you'll see that is common to fall into so that we can address the root cause and therefore not make the mistakes again. If we don't know what the root cause is, then it's really hard to, not keep repeating it, right? And then we'll talk through the 5 steps to plan your upcoming year. And then finally, give you 2 steps to put the episode into action. That's our agenda for today. Before we dive in, let's talk about the companion resource. This is one of my most popular resources. And if you haven't yet downloaded it, I highly recommend going to icyearlyplan.com. So the 2 letters IC for independent consultant, yearlyplan.com. And there you'll find the consultant's yearly planning process. So it's literally a workbook, walks you through the entire planning process in the fashion that we're going to talk through here today. So again, that's at IC, the 2 letters IC for independent consultant, icyearlyplan.com. Okay, go download that. And one small note there, I have been getting more recently some emails saying, hey, I tried to download a resource and it never came to me, or I'm getting that my business or my email is not valid. If you're having any of those types of challenges, send me an email, melisa@melisalieberman.com. Remember, my name is missing some letters. So Melisa at MelisaLiberman.com. And then my team will help sort out that issue for you. Okay. We want to make sure you get these resources. All right. So with that, let's start and talk about the 4 most common planning mistakes that I see consultants making. And I'm going to share this with you in more of a spectrum today. So we have 2 ends of the spectrum, obviously. On one end of the spectrum, most common mistake that I often see consultants making is goal avoidance. Goal avoidance. So when we go about planning our year, it starts out with goals, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But if we avoid this altogether, whether it's goal avoidance or planning avoidance or goal and planning avoidance, this is really common. And you might say, well, that I can't believe people are doing that. But I can't tell you how many people come to me and tell me that they set a goal at one point, but they completely forgot about it. No matter what time of year it is, sometimes it's still January and they've forgotten what the goal is. And then they kind of fumble around looking for it, which is interesting because when we set up a call, I usually tell them, I'm going to ask you what your goals are, right? It's indicative of us not really owning that goal, not truly committing to the goal, right? There's no shaming in the fact that you forgot the goal. I've done it myself. The point is that when we either don't set a goal or we set it and forget it, that's what I'll put in the bucket of goal avoidance. And that is definitely a mistake. We don't want that to happen for you. On this spectrum, the second type of mistake that I commonly see is that we have what I'll call goals only. So we answer the question, what do I want this year? And maybe we set a revenue goal and that we kind of do it, that's it. Or we say, oh, I'd like to take a couple of months off. And so we just set these broad brush goals. Or maybe that is, I want to work 4 days a week. But we create these broad brush goals and then we don't take the next layer. We don't take the next layer. And I'll tell you what that is here in a moment, but planning out how are you going to achieve that goal? And so when we do that, when we don't do that, rather, so when we set the goals and we don't truly create a plan, I'll tell you what the plan would look like here in a moment. But when we don't actually create a revenue plan, when we don't actually create a lead generation plan that rolls up to those goals, then what we end up doing is abdicating to all the external forces, right? Abdicating in the sense of you set a goal, maybe it's to make 500K this year, or maybe it's to make 100K this year, whatever the goal is. And then when you don't create a detailed plan, then you end up just hoping and taking whatever comes your way. And that's what the abdication looks like. And so that, of course, leads you to under earning and to taking on work that is not ideal for you, maybe taking on red flag clients. And we don't want that to happen to you either. This is a very reactive mode. The third mistake that I commonly see consultants making is organizing the work instead of making a plan. Let me say that again. They organize the work instead of making a plan. So let me tell you what this looks like. You might decide, let's say your revenue goal for next year is 300,000, so 30K months. And if you were going about this to organize the work instead of making a plan, what that might look like is that you decide, okay, I've already sold these engagements. Maybe it's 100K or 50K. So you know that you have, in this example we're using, let's say it's 300K and you already have sold 100K. Then you start thinking, I need to sell 200 more. And then you start listing out some tasks and mapping out the calendar and reacting to whatever is coming your way. And the questions that drive this are things like, what do I need to do? How will I fit in what I need to do for business development? This is a nuance. And I want to point that out to you. This is a nuance. When you're organizing the work, by work, we mean client work and your work on your own business. When you're more focused on organizing the work rather than making a plan, a revenue plan, a lead generation plan, when you're not putting those plans in place and you're just organizing your tasks, you're going to fall into that same trap, which is under earning and creating feast or famine because you're missing that link. You're missing that link from your goal to the execution, and you don't have something in the middle. And I'll tell you why that is here in a moment, why it's so common for consultants to miss this piece in the middle, these plans, like the revenue plans. So first we have goal avoidance, then we have just goals and really nothing underneath them. We call that tall hat, no cattle here in Colorado. Tall hat, no cattle means you basically went to the store and you bought yourself like really cool gear, but you have no cattle. Or like if you go skiing, you go and buy like the most amazing outfit and you get the most amazing equipment, but you don't actually know how to ski. That's the example here, goals only, without really anything underneath it. Then we have the scenario where you create a goal and you put a bunch of tasks, but you don't have a plan. And I'll tell you what that plan looks like again here in a moment. I've told you that. Those are the first three. And then the fourth most common planning mistake is making a plan, but not implementing it. You may have done that too, right? So many of us do. You may have a plan, but you don't implement it because the status quo takes over. The status quo takes over. You get really busy with client delivery and you don't implement your plan. You get really busy with client delivery and you tell yourself, I'll do that lead gen next week. And each week it just keeps piling up. The other way this works is you make a plan and you implement it half on, half off, inconsistently perhaps, but you don't have a continuous improvement approach. It feels like pass fail. Ew, this isn't working. I better redirect and do something else versus this is what I decided to make work. I wonder what I need to adjust. So, those are the four most common planning mistakes that I commonly see. And so, we're going to talk more about, you may relate to some of those, you might relate to all of them. But ultimately, if you're doing any of this that we just described, all four, one of them, half of one of them, the impact ultimately is that you become very reactive in what you're doing, running your business. And you're at the mercy of what lands on your plate. You're at the mercy of your warm network and who might call you out of the blue. You're at the mercy of referrals that you might get. And of course, especially if you're neglecting business development or you're really inconsistent with business development, it creates feast or famine cycle. It creates you overworking and under earning and taking on less fulfilling work. That is the impact of not having a fully baked out plan and then being able to execute against that. So, we're going to talk about what this fully baked out plan looks like here in a moment. But before we get to that, I want to address the root cause because that's what all of this hinges on. You can go executing any plan that you want, but if you're operating it from an ineffective headspace, it's not going to come out the way that you want it to. And so that's why understanding the root cause is so important. So, what is the root cause? Ultimately, making those mistakes that we just described comes down to you operating as the doer in your business and not the business owner who's responsible for driving work. Let me say that again. Ultimately, an incomplete plan comes down to you creating the plan or creating the goals without a plan, the tall hat, no cattle, or not even creating the goals at all, comes down to you in the headspace of the doer, which is the consultant doing the work, and not the business owner who's responsible for driving revenue, driving the work into the queue. Why would you do this? Well, of course, that's first of all the headspace that you're most comfortable with, that's most familiar, the one who does the work. You did the work, you were an employee in corporate, most likely. And now, in part, you are an employee of your business, but you will also wear two hats, more than two hats, really. You will have the doer hat and you have the business owner hat. And when you don't wear the business owner hat, or when you're not thinking like a business owner as you're driving these plans for this coming year, then of course they're not going to set you up for success. And the reason that you would do this is because it's familiar. It's so much more familiar to be the consultant or the doer. You don't want to feel failure. You're a human. You don't want to feel discouragement or disappointment or fear. So it can be so much easier to put that doer hat on, the one who's doing the work, and either not set goals at all or set some high level goals and hope they come to fruition and kind of see what happens for the first quarter and make adjustments from there. Or maybe you just try to manage your task list and feel like you've got to work harder to hit the goals without really looking at the strategy and plan behind it. That's what a doer does. You're not a doer. You're first and foremost a business owner, because if you're not a successful business owner, there will be nothing for you to do, right? So we want you to put that business owner hat on as you're planning out the coming year. One of the other reasons that you would be doing this or not doing what, making those mistakes, is because it feels productive. It feels productive to organize work, or it feels productive to write down some really amazing goals and then not have to think so much about what am I going to do to bring these to life. And the other component that comes into this so often is that we think things are out of our control. And that one I really want to hammer home, because if we set a goal, let's say $300,000 next year or $500,000 next year, it can be so easy for you to say, well, I don't know where those clients are going to come from. I don't know where I'm going to find three retainer clients to hit my goals. I can't control whether those clients sign an agreement with me or not. And so it can be so easy to talk ourselves out of, because of that dialogue, inner dialogue, it can be so easy to talk ourselves out of generating a really detailed plan and going for it and being okay with the results not looking exactly like the plan. Okay, so that's the root cause, is thinking like a doer and not the business owner who's responsible for driving the work. And that's the trap that I want to help you avoid as you go into this planning season. So now let's talk about the solution. And the first thing I want to say, I want to really give you a picture of what it is that I'm talking about right now. And then we're going to talk about 5 steps you can leverage to plan out your coming year. And here's the picture that I want to paint for you: what it looks like to, as a CEO of your business, as a business owner, to approach this yearly process as it compares to what a doer or a consultant or an employee would be thinking, so that we can really hammer home this idea of the headspace that you want to be in as you are planning out the year so you can set yourself up for success. So, when we look at the CEO, that successful CEO, that successful business owner, that business owner who can set any goal and achieve it, which honestly, this has taken me years to figure out. And when I first started, I never thought that I could set a goal and achieve it when it came to running a business. I felt like I could do that as an employee, but quite frankly, there was a lot of negotiating that went on. And throughout the year, the goals would change and the goals would morph, and you would get really good at justifying why the goals should be reduced because of all these reasons, right? That's what an employee does. But when you come at this as a business owner and you start thinking about, how am I going to set and achieve goals? For me, for example, when I first started, as I just said, I never thought that I would be able to set and achieve a revenue target. It felt so beyond any realm of possibility. It felt like there was so much out of my control. It felt like I had no idea what I was doing, even though I did. And it felt just insurmountable in so many ways. And even now, 13 years later, even though I absolutely think of myself as a business owner who can set and achieve goals and even exceed those goals, there are often so many times where that doubt comes into play. So it never goes away, but you want to really get to the place where you think like a business owner, which means that you are someone who sets ambitious targets and that you are putting process in place and strategy in place to achieve those targets, and that you're okay with the negative emotions that come with the ups and downs of feeling discouraged or fear that you're not going to hit the goals, and that you don't just reduce the goal in order to try to avoid all of those negative emotions. So, what this looks like as a successful business owner is that you're someone, when it comes to planning out the year, it looks like you setting ambitious targets to expand in your mind what's even possible. It's you as a business owner treating any misses that you have, any gaps, right? The misses that you might have as data, not as failure. And when a miss does occur, that you don't use that as a reason or a justification to set a more reasonable target next time. Instead, you ask yourself, okay, this time I fell short. Maybe I only hit 50% of the goal. Instead of changing the goal next time to 50% of what it was you hit, you ask yourself the question, what can I shift to? I got half of the way there. Now, what can I shift to get the other half of the way there and to double what I'm doing? Those are the types of mentality that you would have when you're approaching your planning as a business owner, as compared to if you're approaching your business as a consultant or as a doer or as an employee of your business. If you approach your planning in this way and your goal setting in this way, what you will do is optimize for safety, optimize for being able to predict and set something that's reasonable, and ultimately underachieve, underperform, under earn. You're capable of so much more. But when you try to create this little safety net for yourself or this little nest for yourself from an employee mindset perspective or a doer mindset, you end up limiting yourself so much. And year over year, this compounds. Don't do this to yourself. The other way that you might be treating your planning process as a consultant or as a doer instead of a business owner is by thinking that any misses that you have, where you don't hit the goal, where you don't achieve the goal, that somehow it's a risk to you, that somehow it is a signal that you're not qualified, that somehow it impacts your reputation. So often people say, well, I don't want to go out working on acquiring business because I don't want people to think that I'm not successful. It's like, it's actually the opposite. If you're not working on acquiring business at all times, then number one, you won't be successful. And then they'll be right. And number two, they should be thinking of you as, oh, look, they're a business owner, that they must be successful because they're doing this. If they don't think that way, then they don't understand business. So you don't want to give them control over the way that you're approaching your business because you're worried about how they think. So I want to really paint that vivid picture for you so that you can understand what it sounds like, what it looks like to be planning as a business owner as compared to an employee. Okay, let's talk about these 5 steps and give you some tangible process for you to implement what we're talking about today. The first thing that you want to look at when you're planning like a business owner, not as a doer, but as a business owner, is I'm going to just give you all 5 steps and then we're going to drill into each one of them in much more detail. So, first, we're going to set the goals for your business as a business owner. Then we're going to determine what business model supports those goals. Then we're going to identify what must change in your business to make those goals achievable. Then we're going to build out a detailed plan. And then we're going to execute, evaluate, and adjust. Those are the 5 steps. Set the goals, determine what business model supports the goals, identify what must change in your business to make the goals achievable, build out a set of detailed plans that map back to the goals. These are not tasks, these are plans, these are strategies that you are going to employ to bring your goals to life. And then you'll make sure that you've got yourself set up to execute, evaluate, and adjust. Okay, so let's dive into these each one by one. First, you want to be setting your goals. And we'll put these questions in the show notes. So if you are in your podcast player and you'll see a link somewhere on there that says link to full show notes, if you click that, it will take you to a page that has all of this written out for you so you can print it off or copy paste it and implement this. Or you can just go to icyearlyplan.com and download that workbook. Okay. Number 1, set the goals. What do you want in the upcoming 12 months? What would success look like? These are answering those types of questions, right? This is things like, what is the revenue goal? What do you want to be working on a yearly basis? Maybe it's you want to take a month off in the summer and a month off at the end of the year, and you want to work 4 days a week. Like getting really clear with yourself. What don't you want? Those are the types of goals that you want to be setting for yourself. Answering, what does success look like? Listen, these goals don't need to be practical or realistic. They don't need to be connected to reality. In fact, most successful business owners are not connected to reality at all. They're willing to set audacious goals and be okay with not fully achieving them, but creating such progress in the direction that they want to be moving toward. And the other thing that I want to emphasize for you is that by setting big goals doesn't mean that you have trade offs. This is where the concept of compound goals comes in. We've talked about this on the podcast, and I think there's even an episode about compound goals somewhere. We'll put the link in the show notes for that. And the idea is I want this amount of money and I want this type of work. I want this amount of money and I want this schedule. You don't have to assume that when you go for something big that you're going to have the trade-offs. Set the compound goals so you're working toward both of them. This is the mindset of a business owner. I think I've told this story on the podcast before, But I remember the CEO of the startup that where I had spent most of my corporate career, he would talk all the time about, I think we had like 15 employees at the time. And he would talk about how, in 2 quarters, we're going to open an office in Argentina or somewhere in South America. He would set the craziest goals and we would really buy into it and get excited and moving in that direction. And I can tell you the company still exists that I helped start and they still don't have an office in Argentina. So, and this is like, I don't know how long, oh, geez, 20 years later or more. Actually, 25 years later, almost 26 years later, there's still no office in Argentina, but the company still exists. And that's very rare for startup companies, tech startups. So, setting these big, audacious goals and putting them in a compound way isn't going to harm you. If you can deal with the disappointment and the ups and downs that you didn't achieve 100% of the goal and get over that, then the sky can be the limit for you. Okay, number two, determine what business model supports these goals. This is where the planning starts coming into place. What are you going to offer? Who is the ideal client for what you're offering? How will it be priced? How much capacity does each of those offers consume? What's the ultimately pulling all of that together? What's the ideal mix of services that hit your goal? And sometimes I hear people push back on me and say, well, I don't know what my clients are going to want to buy. So I don't know how to plan for this. Or I don't want to turn away any work. So I'm nervous about limiting myself to this. But I can assure you, if you're trying to be all things to all people, you've heard this a million times, not just from me, that you end up underperforming, underachieving, under earning as a result. Put a stake in the ground. If you want to move into advisory this year, then put it on the plan. Don't hope that it's going to happen. Put it on the plan. Put 50% of your revenue and the engagements that roll up to that on your plan. And the other 50%, move it into advisory. And then teach yourself and figure out until you can get that into the norm, into the just as the way it is, right? But if you don't put it on the plan because you're worried that you're not going to achieve it, then you're never going to try to tackle that. Put it on the plan. Put down what you want, not what you think is possible or reasonable. Put down what you want your business to look like. Put down what type of work you want to be doing. Put down what type of pricing you want to be charging so that we can figure out how to make that happen. Don't put down what you think is realistic or reasonable or practical. I could stay on this topic all day, obviously. Please, let's focus on you creating your employer of choice. You can ask yourself, how could this be possible? Not, is this possible? I'll say it again. Put down what you want, even if it seems completely out of reach. And ask yourself, how could this be possible? Not, is this possible? Okay, you might want to listen to that one on repeat a few times because it's so important, that step two. Now, step three, let's identify what needs to change. Even if your business is very new, there's still things that need to change. And especially if your business is 5 years old or 10 years old or 20 years old, of course, regardless of where we are at in the maturity of our business, there's always something that needs to change. So you evaluate the current state. What's working? What's not working? What changes do you want to test? And understand the potential obstacles with your plan. How likely do you think the outcomes will be that you just laid out in step two? Why do you think it's that likely or not that likely? What do you think will stand in your way? What would make this a 10 out of 10 likelihood for you? Answering these types of questions will help you to identify what needs to change. And I'll give you a hint. Most of the things that need to change about your business are mental. They are mental. I was working with a consultant the other day and we did this exercise and she was talking about, okay, the things that I identified are, honestly, I don't believe that achieving this is possible. I don't know if I'm fully committed to it because I'm worried that I'm going to fail. There's fear around the plan. I'm not confident that I can do this. So confidence, commitment, self-doubt, All of those things are mental. If it doesn't just get fixed by achieving the goal, you've got to fix the mental piece to achieve the goal. So that's why this step is so important. Number three, identify what needs to change. And it might be some constructs in your business. Maybe it's tightening up processes or creating more processes or creating some efficiencies in your business with templatizing some things. But most of it is mental. And if you haven't identified anything that needs to change mentally as part three, this is the third step, then I highly recommend you go back and relook. Relook. We all have mental opportunity, myself included. Okay, number four. So now we're going to pull it together into a detailed plan. Ask yourself, what projects do you need to undertake to bring your goals to life? What do you need to stop doing? What do you need to stop thinking? And what is the thought process and mindset that will bring your goals to life? Look at your goals and figure out what plans need to be put in place to bring those goals to life. Now, I emphasized earlier, we're not talking about tasks. We're not talking about a checklist here. What we're talking about is your strategy and detailed revenue plan, for example, for you to bring that revenue goal to life. Let's just take the example again. If you're working on building 50K months, what does the revenue plan? How do you literally make up the 50K or the 500K, the 50K per month? Is it that you're selling two huge engagements or you're selling, 7 retainers, whatever it is in the course of the year, getting a detailed plan so it's tangible on paper and you've got the obstacles identified so that you can keep those top of mind. Like we just said, part of your plan, you want to pull together the revenue side and you want to pull together the mental side and any other obstacles you've identified, any projects that you need to put in place in your business. Maybe it's that you need to implement a CRM. That would be an example of a project. Pull it all together into a detailed plan, just like you would do for your client. If you had a client who came to you and said, I need help figuring out how to improve my business development process and create 50K months more repeatedly, you would probably help them do these things. This is what you want to do for yourself in your own business as the business owner, not as the receiver of the plan. That would be the doer. You're the one building this out and saying, this is what I think best sets us up for success is if we pursue this type of clients and we pursue this type of nature of work and we take this lead gen approach and we ultimately think in this way compared to how we've been thinking, that's what brings your goals to life. And finally, you want to implement and adjust the plan. So this addresses the mistake of making a beautiful goal, maybe even plans and strategies to implement that goal, maybe even lead gen plans of who you're going to reach out to. And then you just put it in the desk drawer and then you get amnesia eventually that you forgot what it even was. We don't want that to happen. And so that's what step 5 is implementing and adjusting. And I have these two together for a reason. You are not Nostradamus. You cannot predict the future perfectly. You're only figuring out what your best guess is of how you're going to achieve your goals. And you might be wrong. Likely you will be wrong. And that's not a problem. It only becomes a problem when you think that by coming together the way you think it will be, that you stop pursuing the goal. So you want to have a process in place where you're consistently looking at what your results are and evaluating those against your goal and frequently adjusting based on that evaluation. This is you setting a hypothesis, which is the goal and the plan to achieve the goal, and then testing and adjusting until you achieve that goal. What if it takes you 14 months instead of 12? That's not a problem. Imagine that. You consistently and voraciously implement your plan and evaluate it and adjust it. And you end up creating your 50K months consistently in 14 months instead of 12. Are you going to be upset with yourself? Absolutely not. But if you treat it like a pass fail and you say after the first quarter, oh, it's just not working, and you decide to pivot or give up the goal and hope that you can recreate what you created last year because it's comfortable, then that is giving up. And that is what a doer would do, not a business owner. All right. Those are the 5 steps to put this episode into action so that you are not only planning the year, but you're also planning from a business owner headspace, and you're avoiding those mistakes that we talked about and those 4 traps that you don't want to fall into, some of which have a nuance to them. I highly recommend these 2 steps. Number 1, go download the yearly plan for independent consultants. You can find that at icyearlyplan.com. And number 2, get help. You can apply for one-on-one coaching with me, where we work together to refine and optimize your sales process and your lead gen process and your process of being a business owner so that you can attract and close more fulfilling and more rewarding and more lucrative and consulting engagements. You can go to consultmelisa.com, apply, and we'll review your application and get back to you with next steps after doing so, whether it's you're not quite ready for coaching, it might not be a good fit, or I would love to talk with you and see if it's a mutual good fit, one of those 2 things. And when I use the word we, I am the only coach here at Melisa Lieberman Coaching. I have a team of support who helps me with a lot of that administration, which I am so grateful to them for. So that's what I recommend for you here as you're thinking about implementing your yearly plan and getting really clear and making this next year the best yet in your business. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.